Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Fresh Natural Live. You may know that we've been away for 2 weeks. We've been in YouTube jail for telling the truth. However, we'll continue to work hard to tell the truth. We'll just try to do it in a way that is more politically correct. But be that as it may, we have a wonderful show for you tonight. As usual, we're going to talk about the whole concept of negative news videos. So, negative news, what should you know? How can it affect you emotionally? How can it impact your life? And is there a benefit? We're going to try to present a balanced side to this. I mean, a hurricane coming or, bad weather storm, coming. That's negative news, but that's beneficial news. And so, not all negative news could be a bad thing. So we're going to try to look at this from a balanced perspective and say, okay, negative news, which is good, which is bad. Do we need to strike more of a balance? Do we need to, we as individuals, the news consuming public or entertainment consuming public, do we need to come up with a strategy of creating our own balance? The media may have a certain formula for which they think is ideal from the standpoint of selling more eyeballs and the like. Do we need to create a formula of our own? So we're going to try to, discuss this with my colleagues and come up with an approach and some suggestions that may be helpful. So I look forward to seeing you on the other side. So let's go to the intro and I'll get started shortly. Okay, here we go. So another show. Again, we're back from YouTube jail, and we have a great show for you tonight, as usual. We're going to be talking about the concept of negative news, if you will. And I have my friend and colleague here, Dr. Ford Atkins. Hello, Dr. Atkins. How are you this evening?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. It's good to be out of Monopoly jail.
Exactly. And Dr. Celeste Palmer will be doing the honor of leading our discussion this evening as we talk about this whole concept of negative news. So the whole concept of breaking news, is it breaking our hearts, souls, and minds, or is it breaking other things? What do you have in store for us tonight? What's the whole concept of news?
So just to kind of start out, this is kind of a continuation from last week. Last week we talked about media in general, well, not media, but advertisements and kind of the impact that advertisements have on our thoughts, our purchasing abilities and powers, and kind of also something that I wanted us to think about, because sometimes we unconsciously are doing things and not knowing why, is kind of our news feeds, what comes into our house every day. I know a lot of people are not watching TV anymore, but it's on our phones, it's on our smartphones, it's on our computers, it's on the news racks. So, our news is also an area that we need to think about and look at as far as it goes with our mental health and kind of what we're seeing. So we're talking about, let me go over. Our negative news is what we're talking about, that we see a lot of. And I think many people, most of us will agree, and we're very familiar with kind of the direction that the news has gone in the last probably 15 years. And then with the emphasis over the last couple of years of it being even more exaggerated. So let's get into it. If it bleeds, it leads. That's a saying that journalists often use, and actually was coined probably back in the 1890s, I think the article said. And this was something that was said in relation to war, because it was the American-Spanish War during that time. And they were finding that people were more interested in the violent stories that had to do with war. And people were purchasing power for this information was higher. So the saying was, if it bleeds, it leads, as in leading story. And what ended up, as you can, and they still use this saying in today. And so what science has found out, because people are kind of thinking, why are we doing this and why does this happen? And what science has found out is that the public actually has a negativity bias. By definition, we tend to learn more, use negative energy, pay more attention to negativity, far more than we do positive energy. And this is from, an NIH article. This is not Dr. Palmer making this up. Also,
NIH making it up.
Negative bias impacts how we select our news, our form of news, and how we're going to watch it, and also how that news is produced and how it's made, and our view of our current environment. So as you can see in this little picture over here, the heart is looking at all of the good things in the room, and the brain is concentrating on that one bad ball that's sitting there. So, negative news, the truth about it, though, is that it sells. And this is what we've shown, and they've shown, and they know. It is more psychologically stimulating and activating. A lot of times the news is written in such a way that they'll give you a headline that asks a question, and it kind of makes it seem like by the end of the news story, you'll have the answer. So it's one of those, it's kind of mystery, and it's kind of fun, because they may say, at the beginning of the news story, what's in your tap? And so you want to listen to that so you can find out what is in your tap water, for example. That's just an example. Negative news catches our attention. As we can say, you can be very dramatic with it. There's a lot of rhythm to it. So a lot of times when you hear these stories, they have the music going, and it's kind of dun, dun, dun. Not exactly like that, but you know what I mean. There's certain words that they use. There's a format. So that tap story that they announce at the beginning of the news to get you to start watching it, it probably won't come until the last story in the news to get you to watch the whole 30 minutes of news. We know that they give us teasers, headlines, and they also now are giving us the crawl. So the banner at the bottom of the news, that while you're watching a story, they have additional news going at the bottom of the screen. So this can be overwhelming, especially when it's usually things that are going at the bottom of the screen are not the best information either. But what we have to realize is that this puts the reporter in control of what they want you to think and how they want you to think. And then they can sway your thoughts in whichever direction that they want to sway it in. Also, we know that negative news travels pretty fast. You hear something in one space, and especially now with us having internet connection to the world and having our cell phones, something happens one day and it's traveled out around the world. I don't know how quickly, but we know that news travels fast now. Bad news travels even faster. So even though we say that we want positive news, it's been shown that we really don't. The negative news is just what really sells. And they actually did an experiment overseas with a website where they posted only positive stories for 24 hours. And that website lost 66% of its readership on that day.
Wow.
So with the internet and social media sites now, they can track what people are looking at. So the most read and shared social media platforms are the negative ones. Is that me?
It's not me.
Okay.
That was me. I'm sorry.
Okay. So basically, media, in media's defense, media is saying they are responding to consumer demand. This is what the audience wants, and this is what they are giving. So news outlets are a business. So increased ratings equals increased viewership equals increased advertising dollars and investments. And so this is what has happened in the past. I think reporters were more focused on making sure that they gave a balanced story, but it's kind of been changed a little bit by financial incentives. Also, there's availability bias. In addition to the negativity bias, the brain is more likely to remember bad stories. And there's also confirmation bias. We usually seek and confirm things that we already believe or we already know. And we see this in what's happening now. We have different cable news stations, and we know certain people in certain areas watch one station all the time and others watch another station all the time. And we all are very much aware of this. There's a newer term called doom scrolling or doom surfing. And this is, again, not something made up by Dr. Palmer, but it's the act of spending excessive amount of time on your screen absorbing negative news. So this is not something that we consciously do. We don't consciously seek negative news necessarily. It's kind of an unconscious adaptation or a learned tendency to prioritize negative information. So number one may be a little bit bad, 2 may be very bad, and 3 is going to be worse. So we just kind of put everything under, we have a tendency to see things now as the glass is half empty. And so why is that? And so there are a couple of theories. Evolutionary theory says we do this as a form of survival. So that way, if we see negative information on the screen or on our phones, then it helps us to avoid that type of a negative outcome. That the human brain is wired in this type of way to protect us is one theory. And another theory is, which is true also, is entertaining. It's kind of like sophisticated gossip. It basically, positive news is viewed as boring and negative news is viewed as exciting. And this is not just in the United States, this is across the world. PNAS, which is Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, did a study, and they found they took people from 17 different countries, 6 different continents, in the same result. The more negative, the more popular the information is. So let's just look at some statistics. We have 95% of media headlines are sensationalized. And this is an article as of 2021. So they blow it a little bit or a lot out of proportion in order to manipulate our viewers' emotions. Studies have shown that approximately 1 in 10 Americans check their phone or check some kind of form of media every hour. About 20% of Americans are constantly monitoring social media feeds. So that's just not news. But the way our phones and computers are set up now is that if you are looking at something, then your computer or your phone is tracking what you're looking at. So it's going to send you more of that. So you just keep getting more and more of the same type of negative information if you started looking at something negative. Words is bad, worse, and never are 30% more effective in catching attention. So it improves the average clicks. And as I said, this is being tracked so they can see how many clicks websites get. And those with the words bad, worse, and never get more clicks. And I was going to put that in our title today, but I was like, no, that would be too cliche.
Bad news, bad
Headline manipulation doubles readership, and also that they have also shown that when the 65% of news organizations ignore the mistakes that they make. So they may rush a story out and not have all of the facts, but they still want to be the first channel or outlet to get that information out. And they may knowingly or maybe not knowingly make mistakes, but rarely do they come back and correct those mistakes. And that is a known practice also. 26.7% of people are exposed to being exposed to this negative news develops anxiety. 79% of companies do have a bias for their advertisers also. People are 49% more likely to read something when it's presented in a negative manner. And 79% of Americans believe that media is not balanced. So the consequence of all of this overwhelming negativity means that a lot of times Americans or citizens, I'm not scratch Americans, people are receiving inadequate news or incorrect knowledge. And that makes them, at the end of the day, say, forget it, they become apathetic or they just disengage from the whole scenario. Just to not forget what's happening to our children. So 63% of children between the ages of 12 and 18, these are the teenagers, report that they feel bad, depressed, angry, or even afraid after watching the news. 10 to 12-year-olds, these are our tweens, they are also very susceptible to these negative adverse effects, and 45% of them feel bad. So it's really affecting our children. I'll talk a little bit about that later. 48% of young respondents felt that they need to watch the news. They felt it was important to watch the news. And 70% of them felt like the news actually makes them smarter and more knowledgeable. So they have this understanding that they need to know what's going on in the world. So they feel like they should watch the news. But then when they watch it, they end up feeling bad, depressed, afraid, with all of this negative outcome from seeing the images and hearing what is happening. So this, as I mentioned before, this has been a significant change in the last 15 to 20 years. It was not always like it is right now. And the things that it can exacerbate in people is, of course, worry, hopelessness, and helplessness, because a lot of the things that we're seeing is not a lot that we can individually do about it. Sleeping problems, mood swings, depression or worsening depression, aggression, PTSD type symptoms. Also, it also makes us feel like, our neighborhoods may not be safe. The world is going down. Overestimate or our ability to overestimate that we may actually be caught in the situation that we see. So we become overly cautious and believe that, the crime is everywhere and crime rates are going up. Now, I'm not saying that some of this is not true. We all live in a society where we see different things ourselves, but some of it is exaggerated, and it gives us a negative cloud over the world that we walk around in day to day. So this can cause stress hormones to be released. We know once cortisol starts going up, it creates inflammation in the body, and that could be associated with flaring of arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, cardiovascular disease, and many other health problems. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, it is very hard on our mental health.
There's you mentioned the desire for the negative news. The question comes to mind, and maybe you saw some of this from a historical perspective. Did you see a point where, you said that some poll was done where I think World War II, where there was a rating or finding that the whole term, if it bleeds, it leads, and they found out that more people wanted negative news. The question in my mind, was there some point prior to that time when there was some process of feeding negativity into our minds via the radio or whatever the case is that led to a greater appetite. Yeah, I'm trying to apply an analogy to, a craving for sugar. You may crave sugar if it's introduced to you in a certain way, and then it creates some high, and that mental high then creates a desire for more sugar. We have that identified, crack cocaine or whatever other chemical. The question is this negative news? Is it somewhat like a chemical, if you will, a psychological chemical that has been fed to us over time, and we as individuals and collectively as society have an addiction to it?
Yeah.
Has anybody done an analysis to that? I mean, in other words, can you break someone's addiction and a desire for this negative news?
Well, that's what this last slide is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I think I'm just more so, I have two things to say about that, because I think that, our appetite for negativity has actually been taught to us. And that's why earlier when I said, they said evolutionary theory, I said it is a theory. But I think they know that we have fears and anxieties. And I think our fears and anxieties have been increased over years. And I think they realize that they can feed into that, and that creates more revenue, that creates more money. But how do we get the news without letting it impact our health? So I just put some brief things down here. We want to limit our consumption. So maybe pick a time, 30 minutes or hour once a day. You're going to watch the news and then turn it off. Or you're going to look at something on your phone from one site and then turn it off. They're advised against looking at this information before we go to bed because it can affect your sleep. Printed media may be a little bit safer because you don't have somebody's voice and somebody's emotion behind it. That can also make you feel more nervous or helpless or hopeless, depending on how it's being presented to you. Also, you can turn it off. I mean, you can close the paper and move on, or you can, I guess you can turn your phone off too, but it seems to be more addictive when it's on your phone. We should not expose ourselves to sensationalized negativity for hours a day. And I think we all know that. So I think that's why I wanted to talk about this, because some people are saying, well, I'm just watching the news. And so they feel like it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. But this is just to kind of scratch the surface and to shine light on what is happening. This is not a full examination of the news, but just to kind of get people aware of what is happening. Also, we want to ask ourselves, how much have we learned? Did we get what we needed? And can we move on? Because we don't need to keep confirming what we already know, right? Because that's just going to create more anxiety, even though we end up doing that a lot when we watch TV. And then we may also set up a news fast. Maybe we do one day, or maybe we do a week where we just turn it off, such that we are not feeling overwhelmed. Can also counteract, after you see something on the news that may be emotionally taxing, do the opposite. Do something positive. Do your outlet. Maybe read a book. Maybe go on a jog. Also, be mindful and intentional about your thoughts. After you see a negative story, think about what that means to you, and and how you're going to move about in your environment. And also, we have to remember, talk to and teach the children. Even though a lot of children are not sitting and watching news or necessarily seeking it on their phones, just like this stuff pops up on our phone, is popping up on their phones because they have phones. They are very much aware of what's going on in the world. They may not understand all the levels of complexity as we don't understand all the levels of complexity, but they are trying to figure out how to maneuver in this world. And this is kind of a new space for all of us. And they don't know how to balance some of this stress. It's a lot of stress on them because I see them daily. So I think we have to be mindful of that and teach ourselves to pull away from this and how to balance it so that we can be able to teach the children how to do that also.
I like those bullet points, the whole being mindful and intentional about your thoughts. I'm going to throw biblical scripture here. I'm not trying to preach to anyone or convert anyone, but imagine other texts that have this, but I'll throw this up on the screen for people to look at. But in the Bible, the Philippians 4:8 through 9, and I'll read it. Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. The things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. So, there's a scriptural thing that there's a biblical foundation, if you will, that speaks to what you're talking about. And, there's some spiritual aspects of that I just read, but there's also a practical aspect. And you read the Bible, it says, and the word became flesh and dwelled among men. So there's a spiritual to a flesh level of all of the advice we get. And there's a practical aspect to this. And we have to, understand that. Even before that, it says, be anxious of nothing but everything in prayer. So you're looking at the news too much, you're very anxious, you need to pray about it. And then you need to start thinking about things that are positive. That's essentially that from, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9 talks about. But I think it's something that we have to be mindful of, and as you point, and intentional about, because the world is loaded with a lot of negativity and things that are trying to fill our minds up with negative thoughts, evil thoughts, etc. And certain negative news is I think okay, perhaps, and maybe I want us to get into that discussion. Or maybe you can pose it as a question. Is a certain amount of negative news important or beneficial, valuable? I'll pose it as a question. We can discuss it later. But I like the bullet points you share because there's some I think some foundational principles in the biblical standpoint, spiritual aspect that supports that, and there's a practicality to that I think is very important as well. Any other comments? I don't know. You have the slides?
No, that's the last slide. Another thing that because we have some videos that we're going to show a little bit, coming up. But in another technique, they use different techniques too. Because sometimes I think we don't realize the science that goes behind what they present to us. So they have different techniques. Some of these stations, and maybe all of them do, I don't know, because I didn't really get into reading that much about it, but they hire consultants to write their stories. And the consultants kind of know what sells and what doesn't sell. So, the journalist doesn't actually write the story. And with that, they kind of they can sway it in a negative way. So this is called stunting, or just add water reporting. So they have a consultant write it. Then the person on TV is more like, I guess, an actor. So they present the story in a emotional, a dramatic, rhythmic way to the public. And this is the show, and this is what sells. So keep in mind that technique is being used to present a story in order to keep you on that station, because this is your favorite station, because you love this anchor, or you like this certain thing. Not necessarily the news, but the people also are placed on purpose, and the information is given in a very strategic manner.
Fascinating. So before we go to the break, I just want to throw out a couple of questions or thought process for us to chew on during the break. But one, is negative news? Can negative news be beneficial? Two, if so, what kind of negative news, and what kind of strategies can we pose as the listening public to protect ourselves and extract the ideal part of the news that, if we want to assume that some of it is good, extract the good part and leave the negative part. So I'll just put that out there, and I'll get some of my colleagues to comment as we come back from the break. Okay, we are back, and so we're going to pose this. So, Dr. Palmer, do you want us to look at is there a particular video that you have in mind you want to look at? Should I just kind of randomly select? We have some videos that you shared with us. I can randomly select some if there's any one that you want to look at in particular.
There's one that I know that I want to end with. But
give me do you have the title of that one? I can make sure I don't play that one up front.
That was the compilation.
Compilation. Okay. I don't see one titled compilation, but climate change. Either way, I'll find that one.
Okay.
Let me play this one.
Airline. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see here. And my guy.
Did he rename them?
He may not. I have a climate change, rent prices, bright side, U.S. violence, unruly acts, weather update, violent weekend. There may be some.
Can I say something?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, good evening. I'm sorry I got here late, but
No
I agree with Patrice, who said we must be intentional about replacing negative thoughts with positive thoughts. And I think, now we're being bombarded with news all day. I mean, in the past, news used to come on 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock for an hour or so, but now we can watch news all day and live. And so, and I think it does have an impact. We need to be informed. So negative news can be informative if something is happening in our world, in our community, or across the ocean. We need to know about it. And and what's going on today in Ukraine and Russia and things like that is, we need to be informed, and some countries may be put in the dark, that don't have control, but we do need to limit it. And I think Dr. Palmer made good points that we need to limit the time that we spend watching news or negative information, which is not always positive. But we need to intentionally incorporate positive things and positive influences and things what we can do to offset or balance out the negativity.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's about balance, because a certain amount of as you point out, news is important. But like anything else, we need balance. And so it's the imbalance that brings about the problem. And so I guess the next issue is, how do we create that balance? What strategies do you use? I'm going to throw up some of these.
You can pick any of them in this.
Yeah. Top story with breaking news: a deadly shooting at a resort in Cancun. The new images just in. Check this out. Frightened tourists packed into the lobby of a Hyatt hotel after police say suspected drug dealers opened fire on the beach. Guests rushing inside, with video showing several people hiding in the hotel's basement as well. Other guests barricading themselves inside of their rooms. You can see that right there. Police say 2 people who are presumed to be those drug dealers are dead. We have NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer, who's live on set with us here at Top Story. So, Miguel, walk us through this. What is Mexico law enforcement saying right now?
Well, Tom, it's still a developing situation, but here are some details that we do know tonight. We know the Attorney General in Mexico says there was an altercation between several drug dealers on a beach when shots were fired near the Hyatt Zia Riviera Cancun resort. A local news outlet is reporting at least 8 gunmen then entered the hotel carrying long guns. The commotion sent tourists scrambling, as you can imagine. Images coming into NBC News show some taking cover in the resort's corridors and later guests gathering in the hotel lobby, reuniting with family. Mexico's Secretary of Public Security says 2 people died, as you mentioned, both believed to be drug dealers. At this hour, it appears no tourists were injured, and the gunfire, we believe, Tom, is over.
And Miguel, one of the reasons why we're leading the broadcast with this is because, one, it's very terrifying. A lot of Americans vacation there, but this is not new. There was a recent shooting where tourists were caught in the crossfire as well.
Yeah, just a few weeks ago, Tom, and this is something that happens from time to time. Of course, Mexican police try to keep the strip of Cancun incredibly safe. That area depends on American tourists and tourists from all over the country, so it is an important area, and they have more security there tonight and tomorrow, Tom.
Yeah, and then I have to ask you, what is the hotel exactly saying about all this? Because these resorts thrive on tourism. It's essentially the only industry in Cancun.
The hotel statement's fairly limited, but what they're saying right now is that their guests are their top priority. Safety is their top priority. That's something they'll be addressing in the days to come. They're making the point that this shooting did not happen at the hotel, but that guests ran there for safety, Tom.
All right, Miguel Almaguer leading us off tonight here on Top Story. Miguel, we thank you for that.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the...
So interesting video there. I'm going to follow it right behind with another one that I think we can contrast it to. So let's listen to this one.
Good evening on this Monday, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's great to have you with us. I'm Whit Johnson in for David tonight. And we begin with that massive winter storm, days of snow, rain, ice, even tornadoes battering half the country, turning deadly. Snow and wind alerts from North Carolina to Maine at this hour. And as temperatures plummet overnight, the growing danger on the roads all the way to the south. More than 2 feet of snow in Ashtabula, Ohio. Drivers stranded in whiteout conditions. Strong waves and icy wind in Hampton Beach, New Hampshire. In Raleigh, North Carolina, drivers sliding on the ice, struggling to regain control. Other cars scrambling out of the way. A weekend of treacherous driving there in North Carolina. 2 people losing their lives in a wreck. A tractor trailer dangling off an overpass after sliding off the road in Durham. The storm also spawning tornadoes in Florida, an EF2 in Fort Myers. A couple there driving right into those dangerous winds. Tonight, heavy snow still falling in parts of New York and New England, and now the bitter cold across the east. ABC's Trevor Ault leads us off in Buffalo tonight.
Tonight, all kinds of dangerous winter weather wreaking havoc for millions of Americans. East of Cleveland, Ashtabula, Ohio, in the bullseye for whiteout conditions.
Over a foot of snow has already fallen, and it's still coming down.
And they got more than 2 feet. First responders there struggling just to reach stranded cars and trucks. And Buffalo shattering their daily record by 6 o'clock this morning.
Neighbors are trying to free this bus right now. It got stuck trying to back up on this side street because if you look up just a block ahead, there's another bus that was already stuck.
In Niagara Falls, Stephen Michael shoveled 6 hours to get to work.
More than what we expected.
Yeah.
Definitely. Haven't seen this winter in a long time.
Where there wasn't snow, there was ice. Watch as driver after driver loses control on this icy road near Raleigh's airport. In Durham, this tractor trailer sliding off a frozen overpass. The driver taken to the hospital, and at least 2 people were killed when their car skidded off I-95 in Nash County. The same system spawned tornadoes on Florida's west coast, including this EF2 in Fort Myers. Winds up to 118 miles an hour, destroying this trailer park.
And after snowfall rates of 4 inches per hour here today, now lake effect snow is a big possibility through the morning. But even without it, with temperatures falling below freezing, even into the south, tonight black ice is a big threat. Whit.
Quite the picture behind you, and it's just getting started in some places. Trevor, thank you. Let's get right to ABC's chief meteorologist, Ginger Z. And Ginger, where's the most significant snowfall hitting right now?
Oh, my goodness. We've seen some flakes here, but it's all west of us. But you know what else is remarkable about this storm? We started in New York City the day in the single digits, then had a severe thunderstorm warning within 24 hours. Really, that is a rare event at any point for January in Manhattan. But look at this storm. Now it is moving through western New York, so Binghamton up through Syracuse, 2 to 4 inches still possible through New England tonight. Then it will be moving east. I think the next noticeable part will be the wind, and you've got wind advisories from Pennsylvania right down through Appalachia, 20 to even 50-mile-per-hour gusts. One more shot of Arctic air, of course, is coming at us as if that's the end of winter, but at least this week, that starts with 28 below the feels like in Des Moines, 11 below Witt in Kansas City.
All right, we know you'll be tracking it for GMA as well. Ginger, thank you.
So, I kind of let it play long because there's a lot of interesting information there. What are your thoughts about the first one, the shooting in Cancun versus the weather system? Well, let me just throw my thoughts out, and then I'll pass the mic. The shooting in Cancun, I guess it's important to know that something like that happens. And I think the information, I guess if you're going to travel to Cancun, know that these things can happen and the details of it. I don't know how much it affects our day-to-day lives, but I would put that sort of low on the totem pole of importance to know whether or not there's a shooting in Cancun, because there's shootings all over the world in different places. And so that's one thought I have with that. The weather system report is interesting because generally speaking, or I should say generically speaking, we need to know what weather systems are doing and whether there's a threat or forecast. So weather from the standpoint of forecasting the weather, I think is important. This focus on the doom and gloom of what has already happened. So if you would ask me, okay, is weather, knowing information about bad weather important? I would say yes. But I want to know about it a day or two before it comes so I can prepare for it. Me knowing about a weather system that's already had an impact doesn't necessarily, it may or may not have a benefit to me, but unless it's forecasting something else. But they seem to put an emphasis on, destruction and death and the like. And there's less of an emphasis on, prediction of what's coming out. Toward the end, they had the meteorologist talking about some aspect of a forecast, but that was after the majority of it was talking about doom and gloom, death and destruction. And this, oh, by the way, systems moving through, and she didn't really give a forecast. She kind of just told the active of what the satellite was showing at the time, but didn't tell what's going to happen. Well, it's more black ice tonight, et cetera. So they mentioned that to him, but a very small part of the forecast. Most of it's doom and gloom. I don't know who else have any thoughts on that?
Well, I had several thoughts on it, but you have already covered them all. I guess I should have gone first. So in that case, I want to get back to the point of the psychology of the negative news, because those are all good points. And those are the same things I saw too. Like what happens in Cancun may not affect me in Houston today because there were shootings in Houston. Every city you can name, there was a shooting in that day, at some point, no matter if it was at a beach or it was in a restaurant or wherever it was, the shooting goes on. But the impact of the negative news, I did a presentation or research on articles talking about how stressors are the underlying causes of the health problems we see, how we're tying this to health, that a lot of the stressors present themselves in many ways. Normally, you talk about stressors, you talk about things like family stress, when there's family disruptions or people are not getting along, social issues is going on, having problems with your neighborhood is stressors, having problems on the job, even having problems. They did research to show that driving while black was a stressor for people of color. But I didn't realize until now, thinking about this, that actually watching the news is another type of stressor. And so it actually carries a certain level because it creates stress after you finish watching the news. And when we talk about the negative impact or the positive impact, there are two types of stresses. One is a chronic stress, which is one that's really deadly and causes problems. They tie chronic stress to things like cardiovascular disease, chronic hypertension. They tie it to risk for diabetes, affecting your immune system, low immunity. And acute stress was just a short stress, like things that tend to stimulate us. So, or tend to make us more productive or more active. Like if for instance, you talked about the weather. If we had a news report that told us that on Thursday, as tornadoes come, go get groceries, go get gas, get water, be prepared. And that's an acute stress. I'm stressed. I don't want a tornado to come, but I'm gonna be prepared for it. But seeing about how this tornado ripped up the town and left everything devastated, and 8 people were killed, and it's all over now, that's more of a chronic stressor, because you can hear those stories day after day. And so as we watch this negative news, it has an overall health impact on us over time. So people don't really associate it with it, but chronic stress is what this is. And the news is a carrier, I call it a carrier of stress. It is a problem for our society, it's a problem for our health. I mean, it's a tremendous contributor to immune suppression. Was one of the biggest factors when it came to chronic stress. So I think, even when we look at pandemics and things like this, not only diet and nutrition and lifestyle, but chronic stress is another immunosuppressor that is so important. So, I mean, I got palpitations when watching those news stories right there. I wanted you to turn it off about 10 seconds earlier.
I'll try to shorten the next clips.
And I wanted to say too, I'm trying to highlight things that are not as obvious. I mean, we know the obvious is obvious. I mean, we know that there's so much happening in the world today. I try to stay away from those topics that are obviously stressful, the war, the pandemic, and those type of things. But there's so much other in the background that still is negative that we may not see as negative, but it's doing the same thing to stress our mental health and our physical health.
Yeah, that's it's true that we are, and as Dr. Ford Atkins pointed out, there's that layering effect. There's certain things that they kind of throw out there that gives you some chronic low level of stress, and then there's a flare up. So it's like war, pandemic, and it's like weather storm. Run for the hills, go get your supplies. And it's like, and so you have this low level stress, and then there's a flare up of stress on top of that.
I mean, even some of the news stories we watch, the intros to news stories are, if I hear the CBS nightly news come on, I hear the timpanis coming on, or I hear we've listened to the news a couple of days ago sometime, and the voices they use, what's the guy named Hansberry, Dr. Pamela, that comes on with his the voice, the deep voice, sounds like James Earl Jones. This is what's happening today, and all those things get your attention. Breaking news, they always have an intro, so you can be in the other room and people start running toward the TV. It's like Pavlov's dog. You're trained, and when that sounds come on, or it happens. And one thing I want to say about the news 24-hour cycle that Dr. Pamela mentioned before is that when I was growing up, maybe telling my age now, a long time ago, as a child, the only thing we never wanted to watch on TV was news. And when Dr. Palmer mentioned that children, almost half the children feel it's important to watch the news, that's just mind-blowing to me, because that was the last thing we ever wanted to watch. When the CBS news came out, we wanted to run out of the house, because our parents always would watch the news from 5:30 to 6 o'clock, or 6:30 to 7 o'clock, and that was it. And we hated that news hour. And now I understand why the kids want to watch it, because if they're living in fear every day, they figure they can get a head start on what's going on and try to understand it. But, things have really changed 180 degrees.
Yeah, it's amazing. Dr. Palmer, there's a video titled Sinclair's Script for Stations. Do you think that might be the compilation?
What's the name of it?
Sinclair's Script for Stations. Is that the compilation?
Yeah, I don't want you to play that one yet. Can you find the one that says he didn't put anything in there that says airline?
Yeah, there is. I thought there was one. Climate change triggering extreme to kill. It's airline, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything else in airline? Can you give the whole title?
It's the link ends in 74.
Hold on a second here. I'll find it. The link ends in 74.
Yeah, the number 74.
Okay. The bright side, looking back, violence, violent weekend, press high rising, all Americans, prices of squeezing Americans, dangerous. I'm missing that one. I'll tell you what, let me play one.
Okay, just
I'll play one and I'll look for that one while I'm playing one. So let's look for violence.
It's too much. It's too much.
It was so
Surveillance video captures the brazen attack in broad daylight. A cyclist stabbing a delivery man in the back. The NYPD now investigating. From New York to Chicago to Cincinnati, violent crime surged this weekend. At least 11 people killed, 55 wounded in 10 mass shootings across 7 states.
Oh!
In Austin, Texas, 1 killed, 14 wounded. In Savannah, Georgia, 1 killed, 7 wounded.
These senseless acts of gun violence in our community have to stop.
Just this year in the U.S., there have been 273 mass shootings, defined as any incident where 4 or more people are shot. There have been 31 so far this June, and we're not even halfway through the month. What is going on here?
We've seen a lot of the pandemic-related issues related to mental health, unemployment, financial stress, combined with a lot of the retaliatory violence that happens in a lot of the inner cities.
But it's even more than usual. Portland, Oregon has seen a staggering 740% spike in homicide since last year. In this neighborhood with children watching, bullet holes are now common.
My wish for people out there who have guns to stop killing people.
Experts say gun violence usually peaks in August, so police departments across the country are concerned this trend could continue as more COVID restrictions are lifted, Lester.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow.
So, again, more violence. Here's one about rent prices. This is a different kind of story. So let's take a look.
Now to the rise in rent prices. I was just talking about this with some of my friends. Prices in New York City have skyrocketed. Americans across the country are struggling as the prices soar.
Average monthly rents increased by 14% across the U.S. in 2021, and the cost has risen even higher, up to 40% in some popular cities like Austin, Texas.
To make matters worse, economists say rents have more room to grow. Consumer experts expect them to rise by 10% in the year ahead. These higher prices could be a key driver of inflation this year, posing yet another challenge to the Biden administration.
Joining us now is CBS News Money Watch reporter Megan Cirillo. Megan, great to see you again. So can you break down some of the price hikes in these individual cities and why some cities are seeing much higher rises than others?
Sure. So on average, across the 50 biggest metro areas in the U.S., rents rose by about 14%. But like you said, in Austin, Texas, in these coveted markets, they were up by 40%. And
we'll go ahead and cut there. They're getting some details, which I think is good. But and I think that the detail part will play a little bit at so we can see that. But it seems like the analysis can be helpful. But it starts off with rent's going up 14%. And I think to some of the points that you were making, some of the voices and tones and like that, even though it could be an informative piece of information, but, there's a kind of a scare tactic to it. Anybody else thoughts on that one or the one before that with the shootings? Nope. Okay.
I have a little problem with my connection, so I'm not. It's going in and out, so I'm not sure if I'm heard clearly. But go ahead.
Yeah, we heard you just now. Perfect. Yeah. Let me do one more. Any more before we get to the final one that you have an interest in? Dangerous winter weather. We kind of covered winter weather.
Weather already.
There's one that's press pause. Negative news. You want to take a look at that one before the final one?
No, you don't need to do that one.
Okay.
You do gas prices.
Okay. U.S. gas prices. Okay.
At gas stations across the country, prices are shooting up higher and faster than they have in more than a decade. Breaking records in California, $5, $6, premium as high as a jaw-dropping $7.55.
Sticker shock. Wonder what's next. You know, if it's going to be 7 now, it's going to be 9 pretty soon.
The national average now hovering just under $4 a gallon. The spike part of a global ripple effect stemming from war, with a price hike every single day since Russian forces invaded Ukraine, up a total of 38 cents here in the U.S., expected to go even higher as energy giants turn their backs on Russian oil.
How much higher can prices go here?
Well, I think it's certainly within the realm of possibility that here very quickly in the next 72 hours, we could see the national average breaking its all-time record high.
So far, U.S. sanctions have carefully avoided directly targeting Russian crude oil exports, fearing a global energy crunch. But in Washington, there are calls for a full embargo, backed by a recent poll that found 80% of Americans support an all-out ban on Russian oil.
Are you willing to pay more for gas if it meant more restrictions on Russia?
Personally, yeah, I probably would, honestly. It's, I feel like it's just a little price that we might need to pay.
I would rather support Ukraine in whatever we can. If that means gas prices hike up, I would pay it.
Experts say whatever the outcome, expect to see higher prices well beyond the pump.
Anything that touches a truck, commerce, deliveries, groceries, lumber, going to the store, anything that is being shipped via semi-truck is eventually going to get hit.
Gotti, just look at those prices behind you. How much could this end up costing families here in the U.S.?
Yeah, I'll say just seeing these prices is mind-boggling, and hopefully people will be able to find cheaper prices. But experts say the way things are going, the average American family may be spending $1,000 more in gas than they did last year.
So that's an interesting one because, you know, I can only imagine they drove around town to find the sign with the highest prices. and they probably interviewed several people, of course, with the ones who are being patriotic and supporting Ukraine. The one guy said, well, it can go up to $9 or even more. You know, they probably had chose him among several people who was probably more pessimistic. But yeah, it's two thoughts. It was informative. So I thought there was a helpful aspect of it. But again, emphasis on the negative component, cannot be ignored. And, I can see a story like that being beneficial. So let's say you had a story like that that's informing you that, hey, gas prices are going up. That's informative. Let's make, decisions that's going to affect that. Maybe I should buy, stock up on my beans and dry goods now because a month from now it's going to be more expensive because it's going to be more expensive. So that's informative. So maybe that's a positive negative story. The problem is that it's probably sandwiched by other negative news that's unnecessary. And so, you maybe have a Cancun killing before that and some other killings before that. Then it's like, okay, killing, gas prices up. And so you're on your wits end.
I feel like even the way they present that kind of is we all can see the gas prices are going up. I mean, we know that, we're aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's in the presentation of it's going up and how high is it going? Is it going to $10? Is it, so why are we adding that level of where it's going versus dealing with where we are right now? Because we know what's happening in the society is pushing it, but let's deal with where we are instead of saying, oh, it's going to be $20 soon. We don't know that.
Dolores McClain said in school in the 70s, they learned that 50% of the news was fake. I don't know, the source of that. Now it says more like 80% fake now. Did you find any information? You said 65% of the news outlets don't correct mistakes.
They don't use the word fake necessarily, but in the literature that I saw, they said that 87% of stories are exaggerated in relationship to the pandemic in particular.
Really? Can you send me that link?
Yeah.
We won't talk about it more here. That's gonna be another. Speaking of which,
they don't really call, they don't really say fake, but exaggerated,
okay,
sensationalized.
And we'll look at that. But by the way, I'm gonna take a quick little break here. I know we're running up toward the end, but as many of you know, we've been in Facebook jail, YouTube jail. I'm not giving Facebook any ideas. And so we have a private outlook, and the Fresh Natural Live was on last week. We have a community, Montgomery Heart and Wellness Health Journey community. Go to montgomeryheart.com. It is that is a small investment you make as part of a member to that, but we will actually be bringing content, much more in-depth, rich content, not only from this channel, but other sources. There'll be other experts coming on, talking about topics that I think is very important. You'll have access to that, and also past content. We actually had a debate, a live debate on the issue of the recent jab, as people talk about, and there was no censoring, and therefore we were able to talk about whatever we need to talk about. But more content, more information, very similar to this, will be presented in a much more open manner. So go to montgomeryheart.com/journey, and you'll get learn more about that program. It's much more in terms of information, support groups, and the like. So it's a rich community to be involved in. So I invite you to that. So back to our comments. So that's an interesting insight about the whole issue of quote unquote fake news. So like you say, they don't call it fake, but politically correct words, phrase like exaggerated, etc. Is interesting. Here's a question here. Have you ever listened to Dan Muir's tone in his voice on ABC World News tonight when he first comes on and gives highlights of the news? It invokes fear. Yeah, I mean, I think you alluded to that. I mean, that they're actors, and so the talent is supposed to act out the news and not necessarily report the news. We tend to think that they're reporters, but I don't know. What did you find anything in your study about news media people, their backgrounds? Are they all from a journalist background, or many of them from other backgrounds where they're not really journalists?
I didn't look that part up to see who exactly they are. But I mean, we know that they hire people that have a certain look on the news. I mean, because they all have that certain look. So. Yeah. And just because you have a journalist degree, your training may be in acting. I'm not sure what they're teaching people in journalism school.
Well, I'm sure they have speech coaches or coaches that coach them on how to present that too. Like all other news commentators, So if they don't, they'll teach them we got to do it this way or you're off.
That's a good point.
And they all have that same rhythm to their voice, that news voice.
Yeah, that's so there's some common things they bring on the scary. Why don't we look at this final video you have here? This must be a Zinger Sinclair script for stations. Why don't we look at this and we'll comment on this before we go out.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about the troubling and irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news
has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Oh boy, I tell you, this is crazy. So like a guy selling you a pack of cigarettes, telling you that the soft drink you're buying is extremely dangerous to your health. It's I don't know. Anybody's thoughts? Your thoughts, Dr. Palmer? You put this together. There's a lot of thoughts that somebody could have. That's quite a bit of irony there.
No, that was, an example of the stunting, or, they definitely are pre-scripted in sharing the script across stations. It doesn't matter what station, they have the same verbiage and lines to say. I mean, and I've seen compilations like that on other news items also. They just happen to be talking about fake news. He used the term fake news in that story, but this is, again, the scripting that is done. And also the emotion is the same across the board with most of them. And that's, when you play it all together, it plays as one sound.
Yeah, that's a good point. So there's universal scripting. Now I remember. Now this is a little bit of tangential, but the fact that you brought that compilation up reminds me. Now we had a news story done on us back in 2008 by local Fox News here in Houston, and now this I wouldn't call it negative news because it was done on us, but that's another story. But anyway, some bias. But it was a news story done on what we were doing about nutrition and people reversing diabetes and the like, and it went viral locally. The local station got 10,000 hits on the website, and we were overwhelmed with new patients and the like. And we had to do live chats, and they did a special a couple of months later. But one thing I realized that when that story did well, they took that story video clip, the script rather, and videos, and sold it to 12 different Fox affiliates around the nation. And so then they had their news people read the script, and of course the video, B-roll and video was the same because all the patients were here. And I knew that. Well, I knew that because they told me, but then I found out more directly because one of the video played was in Atlanta. So it aired in Atlanta. Someone in Atlanta recopied the video and put it on YouTube. So our first video of a story done here in Houston was aired in Atlanta, video and put on YouTube. This is, in 2008, 2009. I didn't know it until I heard about someone in California, Los Angeles, who called me about our YouTube story and wanted to ask us questions. So we had the story was sold in Atlanta, put on YouTube, and somebody who saw it in LA called us, and that's how I found out about it. But I say that to say this: I would imagine if there's a local story that blows up and it has some national appeal, they may sell the same story to other affiliates. In addition to, writing the same script, there's selling of stories as well that they do that I learned in that example. Fascinating stuff. Any final words, Dr. Palmer? I'll give you the final word. I mean, you put this excellent discussion piece together. Excellent yet depressing.
No, I mean, I just want people to be aware, not depressed, because we all know this is not new information. Most of us have talked about this. We see it in our every day. Just know that it can or it is having a negative impact on us individually, but also society. So maybe have a little bit more compassion when you're talking to somebody at work, or you see somebody in the store who's upset because they may have their own issues and then be dealing with hearing additional bad news. So just in knowing how to take this information, absorb it, and use it how we need it, but then not let it change who we are on the outside. And again, my focus is on the children, helping pay attention to what the children are seeing and taking in. We can't block it. So even taking away the phones is not going to do it because it's everywhere. It's popular culture. I mean, now news is also popular culture, so for the kids not to know what's going on is not allowing them to interact and survive in the environment. But how did they now take this information and not internalize it, but know how to put it in a space and continue to thrive in their life and not live in a fearful space. So I think, you know, in addition to adults doing the things that they need to do to kind of get themselves balanced, I want to emphasize the importance of keeping the children balanced in present day society.
Yeah, and I like that word balance because I think, you know, we have to be informed, but we have to be aware of the process and mechanism by which that information is being delivered. And it's almost analogous to, you know, getting a seed or a nut from a shell. You have to crack through that shell and piece through and get what's valuable and move aside or discard the rest. And so we have to realize that information is coming to us and there's an agenda through which people are delivering that information, and we have to discern it. And one strategy I typically try to use is try to get balance of it. So, you know, if the news is giving you one piece of information, you may call and, you know, maybe it's some bad news in a certain area. Maybe you call and talk to someone, and maybe read a book or look at some historical aspect of that news, depending on what it is. So if it's a war or whatever the case is going on, maybe try to read something about that area. I mean, we got the war in Ukraine. Understand a little bit of the history in terms, you get a historical perspective that'll maybe give you a better understanding of what's happening. And it may not seem as doom and gloom as opposed to, I mean, in a situation where you have a bigger picture and understand what's happening. So that can apply to certain things. I recall being called here by some friends in the DC area and other parts of the country. They would call and say, well, how are you doing? Are you okay? And I would say, well, I'm fine. What's going on? They said, well, there's a big flood out there and wanted to make sure you're okay. And, you know, I'm going to work and don't know about, but, you know, there's rain and there's some parts of the city that's flooding. But they're hearing the national news. And if you look at the national news story, you think the entire city's underwater. And so that was just an example of how dramatic things can be. But if you hear something on the news that seems to be informative, check other sources, whether it's calling someone directly in that place or doing whatever. You know, it's, you know, we have different means of information, I think, and the news is one means of information, but there are other ways. Even if you're calling someone or reading a book or whatever the case is, I think that's a strategy. So anyway, wonderful presentation. I'll see you guys backstage while I close out. We've had a great story, and we gave an extra 7 minutes, extra 12 minutes since we were off for 2 weeks, and we're going to work very hard to stay out of YouTube jail. That means many of our current shows are going to be a little bit filtered, but either way, it's going to be great quality here. So I invite you to stay with us here on the channel, but more so, I invite you to join us in our local community, montgomeryheart.com/journey, because we think that individuals should put themselves on a health journey. Whether or not you need to reduce medication, control your diabetes, or you want to run a marathon, want to learn a third or fourth language. Your health journey is your overall goals for yourself, physical, mental, psychological, spiritual. You want to be on a path to enhance your overall well-being. So I invite you to take a look at our channel and come and join us. We're going to have lots of information, including members on this show, as well as other guest speakers, and there'll be support groups and recipes and a whole host of content, a whole host of informative sources and lots of content and materials for you to benefit from. So until next time, oh, I always forgot. Please hit the thumbs up if you haven't done so. If you haven't done so, also subscribe to the channel. Like us, give us lots of likes, lots of love, so this video can go out. Share it, because I think this is important information. And also stay tuned with us. Stick with us next week. We have great shows every Monday night, and we promise to stay out of YouTube jail going forward. Until next time, keep it fresh, natural, and live.